Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Oh, that mellow music just puts me in a mood. Hey, y'all, happy Monday. Hope every Monday, it's Sunday. That was for you, Russ, if you happen to be listening again. Haven't seen Russ in a while. Oh, well. Hope everybody's doing well, no matter what day it is, no matter what your weather is. We've actually got some pretty nice weather going today and tomorrow. We'll see. They've been wrong before. It's happened. I've been known to shovel 6 inches of partly cloudy off my front deck a time or two. But today we're going to get into array copying vectors. And I know that is the name of one tool, array copy, but we're going to talk about that linear array copy vectors. We're going to talk about circular array copying, and we're going to talk about copying vectors along a curve. And I hope to show you a couple of things that don't get a lot of attention that are really cool when you get into them and you start playing around with it. Make for some pretty neat textures, backgrounds, things of that nature. But before we get going, I want to do a couple of shout outs like I normally do. First and foremost, I want to say howdy and welcome back to Kevin Weil. Um, you were a member for quite some time and just rejoined. You have been missed, and we're glad to have you back. And thank you for becoming a channel member. I do appreciate it. The next shout out I want to give is to my buddy Bull, who basically had a little medical misadventure. He's all right. He's okay. But he's back at it. I get asked all the time if I can do one-on-one tutorials, and I just do not have the time to do that. And I wish I did because I think it's a lot of fun. But the problem with that is simply time. Bull has that time, and Bull is very good at what he does. Now, I put a link to Bull's website down in the description of this live stream, and I put a link to his Facebook group called The Make down in the description of this live stream. If you're a member on Facebook, come on over and check out The Make. It's a good group of people. It's all about building community and helping one another become more proficient with our CNC routers or in finishing or in woodworking in general. It's one of those types of places. It's a good bunch of people. Let me address this real fast here. This will be reposted as soon as I'm done live. It will be processing a little bit, so you might not see all of the chat for a little bit, but it'll be available for replay here on my channel for as long as YouTube lets me stay here. So it won't go anywhere as far as I'm concerned. But yes, Bull does one-on-one tutoring. He covers the basics of Vectric software. He also does more advanced designing in Vectric software. He does 3D modeling one-on-one. He's getting into Lightburn and does tutoring live one-on-one sessions with Lightburn laser software. So he's very good at what he does. He's been doing this forever, it seems, and he's just a good guy. So do check him out. Steve has posted a link over here in the chat to his website, and he's posted a link to the Facebook group. Again, both of those links are down in the description of this live stream. Go check it out. Do yourself a favor. It's a good group of people. And I apologize for doing a bunch of nose rubbing and smacking my microphone. For some reason, my nose is itching like crazy today. Oh, well, I'll get over it. The next shout out I'd like to give is to Steve, who's already made his presence known over here in the chat. Steve runs a tidy little ship called Harneal Media. He is a website designer, builder, whatever you want to call it. If it's got anything to do with a website, Steve is your man. He's very competitively priced. Again, he's very good at what he does. And if you are thinking about establishing or increasing your web presence, maybe you want to create a web store to put your products and services out in front of a bunch of people without paying commission to third party sites and what have you. Steve is your guy. He can set you up with that. He can get you all set up and ready to go. If you're well versed in running a website yourself, he's willing to back up and let you handle all that. If you're like me and don't know what you're doing and you feel like a caveman holding a calculator, he'll do everything. It just 100% up to you. Again, he's very good at what he does. And I don't know how he does what he does. Now, a few of you have taken advantage of Harneal Media, and you know Steve, you know what kind of service he provides, you know what I'm talking about. There is a link to Harneal Media in every single video on this channel for a reason. Um, I consider him a friend, and get over to Harneal Media and check him out. Just talk to him. He's a good guy, that's for sure. Uh, Thank you, Steve, for doing what you do. We really appreciate it. I know I do. Okay, let's see here. Today we're going to talk about, as I said, we're going to talk about array copying vectors. And this, I'm sure quite a few of us have already used it in a basic sense. And some of us have used it in a more advanced sense. But I'm going to go over a couple of things that I think don't get a whole heck of a lot of attention over the course of doing this. And I hope you'll find this a little bit interesting. Now, what I'm talking about over here on Aspire are these three icons right here down on the bottom under offset and layout. And right here, we have array copy. This is a linear array, meaning that all the copies will be placed in a straight line, linear, in X and in Y, or in X only, or in Y only. The choice is yours. Then we have a circular array. This is, I won't say it's got limited use, but it kind of has limited use. And I find it most effective in making clock faces and clock dials, things of that nature. It really comes in handy for that. Something a lot of people don't know is even available is this one here, copy along vectors, where you can draw a curve out here, draw an oval or what have you, and then evenly space vectors around that oval or that vector. And that comes in handy for any number of different projects. So we're going to get into it. I think probably the easiest one to start with would be a circular array. And we can go ahead and demonstrate that now I'm going to make a couple of vectors over here. I'm just going to make a little 1/8 inch circle, or about 3 millimeters for those of you who are on the metric system. And I'm just going to put one right here. Boom. And I'll have to zoom in to get close because it is so small. So I've got my vector right here. And I want to, let's say, design a clock. And I want that clock to have every minute noted on the clock face. I want to use 3 different sizes of wood dowel of 3 different species. So I have a 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter poplar dowel to use for the minute marks. And then I have some 3/8 inch or roughly uh, 10 millimeter dowel that I want to use for the hour marks. And then I have some 1/2 inch walnut dowel that I want to use for the cardinal hours 12, 3, 6, 9. Well, I can mark these positions and do a lot of playing around with just having this vector right here. And all I'll do is I'll select that vector, and I'm going to go over down here to a circular array. And I'm going to create an array of these circles. It's giving me the object size. Now that I will not change, but I am going to have to set my rotation center. I want these circles that I'm getting ready to copy to be centered around the XY0 of this project. So I've got a couple of ways I can do that. One, I can come up here and in these blanks, I can manually enter 0x and 0y. Or I can come over here to this diagram and I can just double click the center of that diagram. And you notice I have a rotation center placed in the middle of my material on my X, Y, 0. And my fields are now entered in, or excuse me, my X and Y 0 are now entered in the fields. Now I have an option here to rotate these copies. I don't really need this because a circle is a circle whether you rotate it or not. But we'll come back to this one in a minute. So I'll not rotate those copies. The number of items I want to copy, there are 60 minutes in an hour. So I'll want 60 circles. Now the angle. I can enter any angle I want down here, but what I want to do is I want to array these circles around a 360-degree circle. So it'll start up here at 12, work its way around and come back up to 12. And again, this is the most basic usage of this. So we're going to do it on a 360-degree circle. Now, I can choose to group those copies or not. Because I'm going to rescale a few of them, I'm not going to group them. That'll just make them that much easier to select. And I'll click copy. And, oh boy, did I make a mistake. You see, I had that one circle placed right here, and it figured out where that circle was in relation to the center. And so it thought I wanted the size based on where this was placed. Now, I did that just to show you that in this case, the placement does count. So let me Control Z that to get out of it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my first circle here approximately where I want it. So let me grab it here. It's in move and transform mode. I'm going to drag it up and I'm going to put it right about there. So that's now is where it's going to base this rotation on. Now, because I've moved it, I've got to go back in here and adjust my rotation center again. So now what it's going to do is it's going to base this array on the distance from this rotation center to where this first vector is. If I had put this circular vector right in here, this entire array would have been based on that distance from the rotation center. So your first vector placement is important when you're using a circular array. Okay. Now, if I copy, I get my 60 copies right there around that circle. So now I have all of my minute marks. Well, what if I don't want to use a circle? I can use a small rectangle. So let me Control Z that. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go ahead and delete this little circle. And I'm going to create a rectangle that is, I'm going to anchor my rectangle from the center of the rectangle that I'm going to make. And I'm going to make it 1/8 of an inch wide, 0.125. And I'm going to make it 1/4 of an inch high, or yes, 1/4 of an inch high, so 0.25. That's going to give me a real small rectangle, and I'm going to place it right about here. Close. So there's my rectangle right there, and I'm going to use that for my minute marks. Well, now I come down here and create a circular array. I'm not going to change anything else, but this is where rotate the copies come in. Because without this checked, we can see by this diagram, it's not going to rotate these rectangles to follow this curve. I'll go ahead and I'll show you what I mean. Oops, I didn't place my rotation center. Control Z. It just stacked up 60 of them. Let's put my rotation center right there again. And we'll copy. Now all my minutes are straight up and down vertical like the original was. Well, that's not what I want. So Control Z will select the vector, my rotation center, and my X and Y 0. And I'm going to rotate the copies. And I'm going to copy. And each one of those rectangles is now turned, rotated to match that circular vector, that circular position that I want it to follow. Okay. I said something about doing a little bit of other design work. If I want to make these cardinal positions, if I want to make them circles, well, I'm not going to delete this one. I'm going to do something else here. If I wanted to make these 1/2 inch dowel or 12 millimeter dowel, I could come up here, circle. I want to make a 0.5. The reason I didn't delete this one is because I'm going to use this to position this circle. And now I have a 1/2 inch dowel right there. Okay. I can delete this mark. Now I can select this vector. And we'll do a circular array there. This time I only want 4 pieces. I'm going to put my rotation center in the center. Copy. Close. And there are my cardinal hours. And I can keep going on and on. I can do every hour with another size dowel. And then V-carve these here, the minute marks, to suit my taste. So that's the basics on a circular array. And in the case of something that you want rotated to match this circle, it's a simple matter of putting a check mark in the rotate copies. But the important issue to remember with a circular array is this first vector needs to be the distance out from your rotation center where you want it. It's actually very simple once you get into it. So by all means, do get in and have some fun with it. Now let's, I'm going to Control A, select all of them. I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to go back and get me a 1/8 inch circle. And I'm going to put that down here. And we'll just work with this one for right now. Let's see. Ayal says circular patterns can also be good when doing gears. Yes, very much so. Like I said, there are a few applications where you will find putting vectors around a rotation center will come in handy. Just right off the top of my head, gears, a compass rose, clock face. I mean, anything you can think of that you're trying to evenly space items around a circle or even an arc. You don't have to use a 360-degree circle. You could do like a 90-degree, just a 90-degree arc for whatever reason. You certainly can. So now let's get into a linear array. And there's a few things here that some folks may know, may not know. I've got my 1/8 inch or 3mm circle right here. And we'll get into a linear array. Now, what a linear array is, again, you're creating copies along either the X or the Y or both. The thing to remember within this form, it doesn't matter how many copies you want, excuse me, it will always include this original vector. So if I want, let's say 5 copies of this, it will count this as one of those copies and add 4 more. So let's say there's my object size, which again, I'm not going to change. I want 2 rows in Y of this vector, and I want 5 columns in X. All right, so now I know I've got 5 circles here and 2 circles here. Well, now I have a choice. I need to figure out how I want to space these copies apart. And there are 2 ways I can do it. I can use a gap, which I have selected here, and a gap will measure from edge to edge. So if I put a gap in X of 1/8 of an inch, 0.125, and an a gap of 0.125, as this sets right now, it's going to make 2 rows in Y of 5 copies, and the distance from edge to edge will be an 1/8 inch in between each one of these circles. The other choice I have is an offset. The difference between a gap and an offset is, as I said, with using my measurements, with a gap, it would measure from the edge to the edge. If I use offset, it measures from center to center. So that may not sound like a big difference, but it depends on what your priority is. If you need a certain amount of space from between here and the edge of your next vector, then gap is the way to go. Symmetry we'll get into in just a minute. Row and column displacement, we'll get into that in a minute as well. I also have a choice of grouping these copies or not, as the case may be. I'm not going to group them just yet. I'll go ahead and just copy them. And there we have 2 rows of 5 columns. Peleg says, those edges being the edges of the bounding boxes of the copied vectors being patterned. Yes, the bounding box, yes. In the case, and it depends on your shape too, Al. In the case of a circle, the way the software draws the bounding boxes, the that bounding box will basically touch the edges of the circle, top and bottom, side to side. Same thing with a perfectly square rectangle. But with any other shape, it draws a box around it. So that bounding box may be out here somewhere. So yes, it is the bounding box. Now, if you use offset, it goes from the center of that bounding box. So yes, thank you. Good eye for that, for detail there. Now, I have a couple of choices here. I can go ahead and leave these by themselves, or I can group them. I'll go ahead and group them just so it's easier to hold on to. Or I could have grouped them when it created these. But now I want to make another copy of these vertically up here. So let's go into another linear array. And rows in Y, I want 2 rows in Y. Because remember, it counts this original within this number of copies. But I only want 1 column in X. So let's go with 1 column. And this will work the same way whether these are grouped or not. I just grouped them because it's easier for me. Now this time I want a gap. In X, I've only got 1. I'm only making 1 copy. So I want a 0 gap here. But my gap vertically, I want it to be 1/4 of an inch. So I'll just put my cursor there and delete. Oops, I deleted the wrong one. Point. Oh, come on, Mark. Backspace. 2, 5. There. Now I want a space between here and the next row to be 1/4 of an inch. Again, not going to change the symmetry. Again, not going to change the row or column displacement. And I'll copy. Now, for those of you who are getting ahead of me, this is the basic layout of holes that you need to start creating a cribbage board. You could very easily copy and array copy all of this along a vector to make any pattern of cribbage board you want, any shape of cribbage board you want. You have your 2 rows of grouped pegs, 5 by 2, and 2 rows of them. So there's the start of a cribbage board. Let me go ahead and get out of this. What I'm going to do, I'm going to select these because I'll use them later. I'm going to right click. I'm going to move to layer, new layer, and I'm going to call it cribbage. And we'll change this layer to red. And I don't want it visible because I want to do something else. So I don't want it visible. There, I've moved them. They're right here, but I don't want to use them now. They are, Eyal. They may be worthy of checking out. I don't play cribbage, but I know people that do. And I'm here to tell you, cribbage players love their cribbage boards. They love a custom cribbage board. And there are some awesome designs out there. If you do a little bit of window shopping, you'll see there are all kinds of prices out there as well. Cribbage players love their cribbage boards. They want to be different, just like everybody else. Excuse me, needed a quick beverage. All right. Let's get back into the linear array and let's do a little bit of playing here. Well, first I need a vector. So I'm going to go back to, I'll just do another circle here. And I'll put it down here. And we're going to use that 1/8 inch diameter circle. And that's as good a place as any. So I'll select my circle and go into linear array. And I want to do something a little bit more dramatic so you can see the effects that we're applying. I want to go with, well, let's go with 10 rows in Y and 10 columns in X. And I'm going to do an offset of, or excuse me, a gap of 0.25 on all of them. Well, let's make it 1/8 of an inch. That way I'm not zooming all over the screen here. All right. Now, what I want to do is I want to play around with row and column displacement. Now, what row and column displacement is going to do is every other row and column is going to be displaced by whatever measurement I put in right here. I'm going to go with a simple one first. And let's say I'm going to put in a, well, my gap is 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to use 0.125 in X. So every other row is going to be displaced by that same measurement of as my gap. And let's take a look at what that looks like. We'll copy. Now when I come in here and look, I have that offset grid pattern. And this was only done with an offset in X that's equal to this gap. So if I close this, come grab my measuring tool, I can put it right here on the edge of this circle and go straight across to the edge of this circle, and that measurement's 1/8 of an inch. Okay. If I measure this circle to this circle, that measurement is 1/8 of an inch. But the center point of this line is right through the center point of this circle. So you see what I mean? If I put this guide right here, then drag another guide right here, right there, all of these will measure 1/8 of an inch. So let me go up here, view, guidelines, delete all guides. So that's pretty slick. Michael Mazalek says, tip, use a tapered bit for better fitting of the pegs. Noted. I have in the past, I've made one cribbage board and I use just a standard end mill, but I'll have to check into that. Thank you. I appreciate that. Eighth Center says, here's a tip. If you're making something like dog holes, etc., that needs pins, don't undo your work if you find that it's the wrong size. Use the gadget circle resizer. Okay. Or you could just go in and uh, scale items individually as well. But yeah, good to know. John Thompson has another tip here. This is good for stars on a flag. If you're creating US flags, you can make one star and create them. Now, the only thing about that you need to know is when it comes to the US flag, the Union, you have 4 rows of 5 and 5 rows of 6. So you do need to keep that in mind. You'll have to go back and edit the number after you get them copied. You'll have to delete a few. So, but yeah, it is good for stars on a flag. Now that was with uh, the displacement done in X. Let's look at what the displacement in Y looks like. So we'll control Z that. Oops, let me get back over here. It's trying to control Z over on StreamYard. And we'll go into linear array and we're going to do 10 by 10, same measurements, but this time we're going to displace in Y, 0.125. And let's take a look at what that does. And this time, the displacement happens vertically instead of horizontally. We're nice and even on all of our rows here. So that's the difference between those two. Now let's take a look at what happens if we do both. So we'll do displacement, the same measurement, 0.125 in X and 0.125 in Y. Copy. And now, at first, that looks like a real mess. But when you look at it, that's actually a pretty interesting pattern. It almost looks like the pattern that you would get on diamond plate, like diamond plate aluminum. Almost, but not quite. And I do like this pattern. So if you were making something like a pie safe, where you needed a bunch of small holes, but you wanted a neat pattern. You're going to punch holes in tin. That would make for a very interesting pattern, I think. I like, yeah, I agree. I like it as well. It's like bamboo. Yeah, in a way. Yeah, in a way it is. In a way it is. So, you know, this is one of those things that where once you see it, you can't unsee it. And now I got to go play, you know? So I got to admit, I used the software for probably about 5 years before I even started noticing that this was here or this was here. We'll get into this one right now. But yes, it's very much like a weave, and that's what I think is so neat about it. You know. So let's close this, and again we'll Control Z. But this is one of those. It is. It's one of those things where now that I know that it's there, I got to get in and play with it. But now let's get into the symmetry. Okay. I'm going to leave everything just as it is, the same sizes and everything else. And we have this section here on symmetry. Now, this can be a little bit deceiving. You have to wrap your head around a few things. What it looks like is a bunch of L's. But if each one of these is a button, and what we're looking at is this is a mock-up of a linear array. For our purposes, this square here would be our original vector. And this is how do we want each individual vector to be oriented. And if you click it, you see that it changes direction. Well, what does that look like? Well, we've got our vector selected. Let's go ahead and take a look. And there's no difference. The reason there is no difference is because what we're looking at a symmetrical vector here. There is no top, no bottom, no left, no right to a circle because it's identical all the way around. So what we'll need to demonstrate this setup, what symmetry is we'll need an irregular vector that has a top, a bottom, and a left and a right side. So the easiest way to demonstrate that is to get rid of this circle, number one, and let's take the same size rectangle, and I'm going to put one right there. I'm going to close it. I'm going to go into node editing, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that point right there. Then I'm going to come out of node editing. All right. So I have a triangle. That has a definite top, a definite bottom, a definite left side, and a definite right side. So now we can keep track of what's going on. So if I select this vector, come in to do an array, and I'm going to just leave it here, 10 rows, 10 columns. And at first, I'll go ahead and I'll leave these all set to the default. While it looks like the letter L, what we actually have here is a representation of X and Y and which direction that is oriented. So as it sits right now, it's oriented to where the start point of this array is going Y this way and an X this way. So if we leave it alone and don't do anything down here, we'll get that as we expect. Now, if I control Z that, and with this selected, I change the direction of these two just by clicking them once, and I copy. Every other triangle is now flipped around the other direction. So when you click them, are they rotating or are they flipping? With this setup, they're flipping. They're not rotating. It's just like if you went in and you selected every other row and you said that you used your mirror selected objects. Okay. Let's control Z that and go back. Now I'm back to the default, but you can come up with all kinds of different patterns this way. Let's flip this one and this one and see what this does. We're changing the symmetry of this one in Y and this one in X. Let's copy. And now I have a row where I have the points facing each other and then the points away from each other. So these look like they're kind of going up in a diagonal here. Very interesting little pattern here. But the fun isn't over because you can go in various different directions. Close, select, go back into it. Let me change these around so that the points are all facing the center. And they will flip upside down and around. So now we have this. And now let's copy that. And now they not only flipped around side for side, they flip top to bottom. So again, this is one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And now I got to go play with it. The only thing you need to remember is it only works with asymmetrical shapes. Well, I hesitate to say asymmetrical. It just doesn't work with rectangles, squares, and circles. It may or may not work with stars. It will definitely work with triangles because that's what we're doing. But if you had something small, let's go over here in the clip art and let's see what we got for 2D vectors. We've got this little house. So we'll put one of those little houses out here and we'll go back to the drawing tab, close that. I'm going to scale that down to, let's make this, let's make it 0.25, a 1/4 inch tall and a 1/4 inch wide. Boom. All right. So we've got that. All right. And I want to bring this off of the center. Let's put it right over here. All right. This has got a definite shape. It has because of the chimney, it has a right side, it has a left side, it has a top, and it has a bottom. So I select that and I go into linear array and I'm going to go 10 by 10. And I just want them rotated that way. I don't want them rotated top to bottom. Okay. And we'll copy. Now every other house is a mirror of the prior one. So you've got all kinds of options to get in and play with. Excuse me. Using a 45-degree rotated rectangle with this flipping and offset would create a really nice weave. Let's check it out. Let's check it out. Let's go with I'll use that rectangle size that I was using just a minute ago. And let's put one right there. Close. And let's rotate it 45 degrees. Just go like that. So we've got that. All right. Oops. And now I've selected it, gone over here, and let's just do every other one this way and see what we get. And we copy. Yeah, and it does. That's looking real good. And let's Control Z, select that, and I'll do this one that away. And I'm just experimenting now. Boom. It's a similar pattern, not really. Let's Control Z that. I've got it selected. Let's turn these so that all of these are facing inward, facing the center like so. And let's copy that. And that's what we got there. You've got all kinds of different ways of playing around with things, I guess you would say. Yeah, I see what you're getting at there, Eyal. Let's see what happens there. Now let's combine that with 0.125 and 0.125, column and row displacement. And let's copy that. And to be honest, it looks the same as the other one, doesn't it? So, let's see here. Kurt is asking, the point you mentioned on the Symmetry tool is the node start point of the vector. Let's find out. Let's find out. Let's select this. Let me close this so I don't mess anything up. And let's go into node editing. The start point is up at the top. Let's select this one and see. Start point at the top. Start point at the top. Start point at the top. But if you notice, we have top left, top right, top left, top right. So it has rotated as well as flipped. So very interesting. Let's see here. I think asymmetric offsets here would look okay. Not 125, but maybe 0.1 and 0.2. Yeah, and again, get in and play. This is the perfect opportunity to do just that. I mean, you could take, well, let's try something here. We've got that changed. I'm going to select that entire selection, and we'll scale items individually. And now what we're looking at here is the size of each bounding box, not the size of each individual item. We're looking at the bounding box. Remember that. So I'm going to unlink my XY, and in my height in Y, I'm going to make them a little bit taller. Let's see what this does. 0.3, whoops, only 1 decimal mark. There we go. Make it just slightly taller. Apply. And it made it a little bit bigger, but if you look, these are also no longer right angles. They're kind of diamonds, almost. Well, not diamonds, they're parallelograms. So they're no longer rectangles. Let me undo that and you can see what I mean. They haven't just grown in size, they've changed shape slightly. Well, let's do that. Let's be a little bit more dramatic with that. Unlink my XY, and in my height, I'm going to go to 0.5 and apply that. Oops, Control Z. Scale items individually. Close. Control A. I forgot I needed to select them all, and I didn't do it. Scale items individually. And want to make the height in Y 0.5. Apply. And that just changed the entire complexion of everything. So intriguing. I mean, and worthy, to me, worthy of further exploration and having all kinds of fun with this. So, like I said, it's one of those things that when you see it, you can't unsee it. Uh-oh, I selected Control A and selected these two. So those got modified as well. Control Z. Yeah, sure enough. IL says, I think the patterns would look much better if they were more dense. Well, that's true. This definitely would look better if it was more dense. I agree with you wholeheartedly there. But again, this is the time to get in and play and just have fun with it. And just on a side note, we were over here in the clip art. There are all kinds of 2D vectors over here. Everything from panels. We've got a dog bone, a bottle, a jigsaw puzzle piece, a light bulb, a heart, an artist's palette. We've got all kinds of different shapes over here in the 2D vectors. And as someone else mentioned already, up here in 2D game layouts, you have 3 cribbage board setups right here. Speaking of cribbage boards, in a Word IL, yes, it will work with 3D elements as well. Okay. We go over here to the modeling tab, you have those same array choices within the modeling tools. So you can do that with 3D elements as well. So, yeah, over here in the clip art, as mentioned earlier, you have 3 different cribbage board patterns: an oval, a rectangle with a rounded end, and a circular cribbage board. And they are sized accordingly. So let's go ahead and get rid of all of this. Delete. And I'm going to go back into my cribbage layer. I'm going to turn it on. And I'm going to turn off layer 1. Now, I said earlier that I was going to save this for a cribbage board layout. I'm going to do a couple of samples here to show you how to get into it. Again, I don't play cribbage. I have made 1 cribbage board in my life, but probably and it was based on a pattern that is there in the clip art that I just showed you. But the essence of this would be necessary for other cribbage boards. And that is, let's say you want to create a cribbage board that's based on an ellipse. You can create an ellipse. Oops, I'm drawing it out the wrong way, but that's okay. We'll close and we'll center that. And it's bigger than my material, of course. So let's transform that. Hold down Shift to lock it in from the center. And there we go. Now this is too small of a circle for this particular layout, but you'll get what I mean here. So we have our ellipse and we have our arrangement of vectors, of holes for this cribbage board. So if I want to arrange these along this vector, what I can do is use copy along vectors. Now this does not have to be a closed vector. In this case, it is. And it's going to start the copying from this vector start points. Let me go into node editing, start points at the top. So it's going to, that's where it's going to start these copies from, the top. So what I'll do to get started is I'll select the vectors I want to copy. And this is a common thread within the Vectric software. The first item selected is what you want to copy or move or align or extrude. The second vector is what you want to align or move or copy or extrude to. So I want this to be copied to this. So I'll select this, then this. Then I'll come over to copy object. I want to copy this object, and I can specify. I can put a distance between the copies, or I can choose the number of copies. So if I say I want 5 of these copied around this circle, now obviously for a real cribbage board, I would want more. And yet there may be some math involved, but this is to give you the gist of it. I have choices down here. I can align objects to the curve, or I can create copies on a new layer, or I can reverse direction, or all three. I'm not going to align them to the curve just to show you what that looks like. Okay. What that means is they're going to keep this orientation, but let's see what that looks like. So I've got 5 copies along that vector, and there they are. Let's put those right there. Now, if we look, we've also got this going on down here. I have no idea what that's doing, but I think it has to do with these being grouped. So let's Control Z. Let's close this. Let's ungroup. Now let's try it. So I have these vectors selected, hold down Shift, copy along a vector. Again, the number of copies, 5. Let's copy. Nope. It didn't like that. It didn't like that at all. Control Z. Now this worked for me when I practiced it. Let's close this. Control Z to return this to the group. I'm trying to remember how I did this. This always happens when I'm live. All right. Copy the object. Number of copies. Okay, let's align it to the curb and let's see what happens. Nope. Boy, that's a mess. How did it do that? I'm guessing it's trying to take that first one. It may be reading each one of these as individuals. I'm going to have to get back into this and try it out again. Well, forget that I did that. Okay. Let's see what happens if I do this. Let's ungroup, and I'll eliminate this group here. Let's group these and select these. Go back in here. I didn't have this issue when I was practicing earlier. Let's copy. Now that worked. What happened? Come on, man. That's odd. That's exactly what it was, Michael. I have 2 group copies, one on top of the other. That's what it was. That's exactly what it was. So that was the issue. But you see what happened. It aligned this group to that curve. And it started up here at the top. Now, let me Control Z that. And let's not align them to the curve. And we get, much like that rectangle and the clock face, they keep that initial orientation. So Control Z, align objects to curve, and now the center is aligned to the curve. But if you'll notice, it's the center of the bounding box. These do not follow the shape of the curve. They just align to the curve at specific points. Okay? If you want these to bend to the shape of the curve, you'll have to get into the distort tool. So and again, it doesn't have to be, it's Control Z, it doesn't have to be a closed vector. Let's go into node editing, and I want to remove this span, and I want to remove this span. delete span. So it's just going to be, it's going to start here and go around to there. Come out of node editing, select this vector, shift, select that vector, come along here, and let's increase that to 6 copies, and we'll copy, close. So it can be an open vector, it can be a closed vector. But if you'll notice, it's basing it off of the center point of the bounding box of this group of vectors. Okay. So the center point of this group is centered on that start point, and this one over here on this end point. Now there are a few options that we have in here, and let's select this and select this. Let's come in here. We can go with the distance between the copies. And I have the option down here to force even spacing between the copies. Now, I have no way, I know that I'm not going to get 6 copies 1 3/4 inches apart here. So let's go with, let's just try 3/4 of an inch, because there's no way I'm going to get that much of space between these copies into there. And what this is not going to put any specific amount of copies. It's going to try to put as many as it can between here and here. Okay. That far apart. And let's copy. Now we got an unholy mess, because if you look, what it did was it placed the centers of the bounding boxes 3/4 of an inch apart from one another. So we have overlaps right here. So let me Control Z that. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I can get a spacing of 1 3/4 inch. Let's try a 1 inch distance. Copy. Now we've only got 2 overlaps here. So Control Z, and let's go with 1.75 like I had in there. Copy. So the center from here to the center here is 1 3/4 inches. And that put a gap in between each one, and it forced even spacing. So let me Control Z that, and let's not force even spacing. Let's just see what it does with this distance. Copy. And it forced that distance, but it didn't force it to space anything evenly. So I have hanging off the edge here and not enough over here. Control Z. Let's force even spacing. And we'll go, and now we have nice even spacing throughout the entire, I guess you'd call that an arc. No, that'd be a curve. That's not an arc. So, but there is one more thing to take into account here. Let's go back out here to layer 1, make it active, and turn off cribbage. And we'll get rid of these. Delete. And again, I'm going to go with an ellipse. Let's do that. Close. And we'll center it up. If I'm just doing circles, I don't even have to draw the vector. I can just select this vector, come along to copy along vectors, and I can select here, copy circles, and let's say I want a 1/4-inch circle at each of the cardinal points. So let's go with 0.25. And the number I want is 4. I don't have to align the objects to a curve. I have the option to put these copies on a new layer or reverse direction. Copy, and I've got these 1/4-inch circles at each of the 4 cardinal points. Control Z. I can do 8. And let's see what we get there. Okay. And that works. This comes in real handy when you're talking about just placing items evenly along a curve. This is not aligning items to a curve. It's placing items on the curve, copying those vectors on a curve. And it doesn't have to be anything as cut and dried as this. Let's go into draw a curve. We'll start here and we'll go down here and we'll go over this way. Nothing real specific. And I get my rectangle and I put it right there. Close. I'm going to go up here. Now, I don't even need to do that. I got my rectangle selected and I've got my curve selected. And I go in here and I align those objects to a curve. I'm copying the object. I'm not doing a circle. And I want 15 of them for some reason. And I'm going to align them to the curve so that they will curve with the curve. And I copy, close, and there we go. Now I don't even need this curve really anymore if I have these placed where I want them. Or unless this is part of the design. I mean, some of this stuff, it's like, holy cow, I didn't even know this could do this. Now I got to get in and play with it. So, Brooke says, so Mark, will you rotate your whole set 90 degrees to work as a cribbage board? Yes. Yes. You can orient them basically, unless you're following the vector, you would orient them in the direction you want them to go. So yes. If you wanted that cribbage board whole set to run vertical, that's how you would orient them. So, okay. I believe that was it when it came to these 3. The big thing for me that I don't see a lot of attention being paid to is the symmetry here and what that actually does. If you let's do something goofy down here. Let me get in and delete this. If I were to take this rectangle, close, then I'm going to change this. Oops. Select it, go into node editing, and I'm going to change this to an arc. And this to an arc. I now have that oblong shape. And let's come out of node editing. And let's make it a little bit taller. Let's make that 1/2 inch high. Apply, so now it's real long and skinny. Close, then we come over here, and I'm going to make it 10 by 10. I'm going to make the gap, let's make the gap 0.25. 0.25, and let's change these around and copy. Doesn't really mean much. Control Z. But if I put this one at a 45-degree angle first, then come in and copy using the exact same settings. Oops, went too far there. And do this one again with no displacement. I mean, that's an excellent pattern for a screen vent if you were making an enclosure for something electronic. You could make that enclosure and use that as ventilation slots. You could even come in and put you and I would want to make guides and what have you, but put you a hole right in the center, like so. I think that's in the center. And then array copy these. And just, I mean, play with it, have fun with it. There's all kinds of crazy things you could get in and do here. You know, and it's one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it. So it's like, holy cow, man, now I got a bunch of stuff to play with. And that is a lot of fun. All right, now let me address a couple of other questions that we got to move on here. Matt Haas, I don't know if you're still out there, Matt. Awesome Wood Things, Awesome Wood Things channel. When using a V-bit with a V-carve cut, is that only an outline type thing, or will it attempt to hog out the larger areas? It will attempt to hog out the larger areas. Okay, let me show you what I mean by that. If we come over here and let's just do a real quick rectangle about like so. Okay, and I want to V-carve that. All right, I got a big rectangle there. I'll come over here. I'll select the V-carve toolpath. And I'm not even going to play with the depth, but I've got a 90-degree V-bit selected. Okay. And I calculate a V-carve toolpath. You see what's going to happen right here. It's going to try to hog out everything down to that flat depth. Okay. That's why we use clearance tools. So you don't get all of these vertical lines in the middle of your V-carving, because without using clearance tools, that V-bit is clearing out this entire area. Okay. Now, if what you're looking for is just an outline, you can select the vector, use a profile toolpath, and let's say I want that to be 1/16 of an inch deep. I don't remember what the decimal equivalent of 1/16 is, so I'll go 1/16 equals, I knew what it was. I was just showing you that there's a calculator that'll do the math for you. And I want to machine that on the vector. And change nothing else. Oh, I do want to use a 90-degree V-bit, and there it is. Select, come down here, calculate. Now when I preview the toolpath, there's my outline. The only downside to this is don't have square internal corners. I have a square external corner here, but you do not have a square external corner there because you're using a V-bit in a profile. It's not V-carving. The only way you can V-carve an outline like this would be to figure out the approximate width you want that line to be. Let's reset the preview, close preview window. Come over here and we will offset this inwards or outwards, whichever. I'm going to go inwards by, say, 0.03125 or 32nd of an inch. Offset in. Now, if I select both of those vectors, come over here, and I may gone to way too fine with the width here for a 90-degree V-bit, but let's try it. We'll calculate that, and we'll preview that V-carve. Now I have square outside corners, but because I V-carved between those two vectors. So I don't know, Matt, if that's what you were asking me, but there's the answer. Okay. I have one final question, and that is Landis Stutz is asking, when I bring in a PDF file and I mirror the object, it does not line up. How do I make it one vector? Okay. And this is the case whether it's from a PDF file or not, because a vector is a vector once it's been imported. Okay. If you have, let's back off of here and let's delete this. Let's say you have this vector. Let's just end it there. Excuse me. And you want to mirror this, but you want these to meet. What you're going to have to do is one of two things. This is either going to need to, well, no, I take that back. Let's go ahead and select it. We'll go into mirror. Now, here's where it comes a little bit technical. Do you have flip about job center checked? If you do, and you flip horizontal, let me zoom out, it's going to place it way over there. I don't want to do that. Control Z. I don't want to flip it about the job center. I do want to create a mirror copy, and I want to flip it horizontal. And that puts it right there. Again, not exactly what I was looking for. Control Z. Let's flip it this way. Now these points meet. So it depends on where you're flipping from and what you're flipping to. So again, the difference here, Control Z, is there is my one vector. I need to make sure I'm not flipping about the job center. And I'm flipping up here to the right. And now these points will meet. I can close, select both, tap J on my keyboard to go into join vectors, And after joining, I'll have one open vector, join. There we are. So I hope that helps you with that, Landis. Again, once a vector is imported, it's just a vector. But you specifically mentioned PDF files. Let me remind you something about PDF files. No, not all PDFs are created equal. Okay. Check your layers. You may have more than one layer visible, and the two pieces that you're trying to connect may be on different layers. So not all PDFs are created equal. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Holy cow, an hour and a half. As I said in the description and earlier in the chat, when this is finished, this live stream is finished, I'm going to be heading over to my buddy John up in Canada. I'm going to be heading over to his live stream on his channel, What If I Could, and What If I Could Scroll, and I'm going to be joining his live stream. So, for those of you who'd like to join us, you can either click the link down in the description, or you can just wait, and as soon as we're done here, YouTube will send you over. Now, I want to make sure channel members remember tomorrow evening, members only live stream at 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. We had a heck of a show last week. We're going to do a little bit of follow up this week. Plans to be it looks to be it's like it's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of you guys have really been knocking it out of the ballpark with some of the stuff you get going. So you got going on. So check the community tab for the link to tomorrow's members only live stream. If you don't know what we're talking about, or if you'd like information on becoming a channel member, click the join button down there right close to the subscribe button. A little panel will pop up and a video will play. It'll tell you all about channel membership. We have a great group of folks, some really talented individuals, and we have a lot of fun. So, channel members, I hope to see you there. Next week, I have nothing special in mind. I am totally wide open. So if you want to go further into these, the array copy toolpaths, if you want to go further into layers and sheets, we can do that. If you want to explore further in clip art and modifications to clip art and all that other good stuff, we can certainly do that. Leave me a comment. It's great to put it in the chat, but leave me a comment so people who come along after this video, after this live stream is over, so they can thumbs up or thumbs down. But leave me a comment. I want to know what you want to see. So, I think that's about it. For those of you who are going to make the trip over, we'll see you over at John's live stream in a few minutes here. For everybody else, I'll see you, channel members, I'll see you tomorrow. Everybody else, see you next Sunday. Yeah, that's it. Yep, that's it. So until then, y'all take care. Have a good one, y'all. And stay safe. But get out in the shop and have some fun. Later on, have a good one. Thank you very much for spending part of your Sunday with me.